Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Pitmaster Potato Salad. That's right, a Pitmaster does not boil potatoes for a salad. Okay, a Potmaster might, or a Panmaster, but a Pitmaster, no. A Pitmaster cooks the potatoes over hot coals, and by doing the potatoes that way, you can produce one of the most delicious versions of potato salad ever, as long as you use the right kind of dressing, which I'm also going to show you how to do at no additional cost. But first things first, and before we get to that, we're going to need to place some potatoes on some hot coals. And my favorite variety for this would be some nice large Yukon Gold, which I think end up having the best color and texture. But theoretically, you could do this with any kind of potato. But no matter what variety you use, I don't think I'd use anything smaller than this, since what we're doing is charring the outside fairly severely, and then eventually we'll peel that off and make our salad with the tender insides. And if the potatoes are too small, we're not going to have enough insides compared to outsides. But anyway, what we'll do is place those on, and we'll try to space those evenly. And besides that, we will also move some coals and embers around to make sure our potatoes are getting heat from all sides. And by the way, we can cook these potatoes on the coals before we've used them for the main course, although I almost always do it after I've cooked whatever I'm cooking, and then make the salad the next day and serve it with an entirely different meal. But really it doesn't matter, as long as the coals are still hot. And for potatoes this size, I'm probably going to go about 6 or 7 minutes on the first side before I turn them, and then we'll give the other side about the same time, at which point we'll turn and move them until they're all perfectly cooked. And obviously all that's going to depend on the size of your potatoes. Oh, and I should mention, some people like to bury the potatoes completely in the coals, which will cook them faster, but I don't think we have as much control. All right, I want to be able to turn these around and check them, and maybe pull some of the smaller ones off before the bigger ones. And if everything's buried in the embers, it might be easier to miss something. But anyway, the main point is we're going to let these char on those coals until the outsides are pretty much black, and the insides are just tender, as tested with a skewer or the tip of a knife. And as I mentioned, the smaller ones will finish first, of course. And again, don't be afraid to move things around so that the heat is hitting those potatoes as uniformly as possible. I mean, you are, after all, the Nat King of your coals. And speaking of unforgettable, that's exactly what your potato salad will be if you follow these relatively simple instructions and you have the courage to let your potatoes cook all the way through, even though the outsides are not exactly going to look great. But as you'll see, that doesn't matter. And that's it. Once our potatoes have been cooked all the way through, we will take those inside, and then we will cover the bowl we transferred them into with some foil, and we'll sort of let those steam on the table until they cool down to room temp, at which point we could make the salad, but I much prefer to pop these in the fridge overnight, which I think makes them easier to work with, and much more importantly, even more flavorful. And that's it. The next day, when we're ready to potato salad, we can mix up our dressing, which is going to start with some Dijon mustard, or the mustard of your choice, to which we will add some cider vinegar. And yes, mine was cloudy, because it was the end of the bottle, but that's okay. A little extra mother never hurts. And then we'll also do a little bit of rice vinegar, followed by some type of neutral flavored vegetable oil. All right, canola, sunflower, something like that. And that's it. We will season this up with a generous amount of kosher salt, some freshly ground black pepper, and of course, by popular demand, a few shakes of cayenne. And then we'll grab a whisk and mix this together to make what we call in the business a temporary emulsification, meaning that after it sits for a while, it will eventually separate. So if you are going to make this ahead, make sure you give it another vigorous whisking before you add any of the other ingredients to it. Speaking of which, once that's set, we can pull our potatoes out of the fridge, and we'll go ahead and remove that charred layer from the outside. And to demo this, I grabbed what I thought was the most charred potato, and I'm going to go ahead and start scraping that with the edge of a knife. And in some parts, that thin skin will just scrape off, but there are spots that we actually have to slice off, where not just the skin, but the actual potato was charred. But we don't have to cut down too deep. Okay, we're just removing the surface. And by the way, I don't necessarily remove it all. Right? It's okay to leave some of those dark parts. Okay, when we grill a steak, we don't slice off those dark marks made by the grates of the grill. Right, that little bit of bitterness is what actually makes a grilled steak taste so good. So if I have a touch of charring here or there, that's totally fine. And that's it once all that ashy charred skin has been removed, as well as the darker spots on the actual potato. We'll go ahead and cut that in half, and then in quarters. Oh, and don't worry if a little piece breaks off. That's considered good luck. And then all we'll do is slice across into whatever size pieces we want in our potato salad. And if you want to pick a larger or a smaller size, go ahead. It really doesn't matter, as long as they're fairly uniform and consistent. So as usual, pick a size and stick with it. And before this is dressed and seasoned, make sure you taste a piece or two, so you can really appreciate the magic that occurs when those potatoes are roasted over such high heat on those smoky coals. Okay, the potato really does become a little more sweet and earthy, and somehow much more rich, which is why we need a very specific type of dressing, as well as we have to carefully choose what else goes in here. So once those potatoes are all cut, we'll transfer them into our vinaigrette, and we'll go ahead and transfer in the rest of our ingredients, which will include some finely diced red onions, some diced celery, as well as some finely diced dill pickle. So yes, because of the richness, we are kind of going with bracing, bitter, and briny, with the only real sweet element being some fire-roasted red pepper, which yes are a little bit sweet, but they're bittersweet. And that's it. We'll take a spatula and give this a mix. And for the same reason we chose these generally not sweet and rich ingredients to add to the potatoes, we're doing a fairly tangy, vinegar-based dressing, and not something mayonnaise-based, which I think is just too rich for the rich-tasting potatoes. So that was my thought process here. But of course, you have to eat this, so you go ahead and add whatever you want. And then once that's been well mixed, I think we should cover it and pop it in the fridge at least 2 or 3 hours, or even better overnight, so everything has time to sink in and for those flavors to really develop. And if you're keeping score at home, I let mine sit for about 6 hours before I pulled it out and gave it a mix, and it was looking really good. But we can't taste with our eyes, and believe me, I've tried. So we'll grab a fork and try a little bit to see if maybe we need a little more salt, which we almost always do. And never forget, an under-seasoned potato salad is an evil potato salad. So I tossed in a little more salt, plus the last official ingredient, which would be a whole bunch of freshly snipped chives, which I have a ton of, but you could also use green onions. And that's it. We'll give it one last mix. And that's it. Once we're happy with it, we can transfer that into a nice-looking bowl, or something like this. And if we want, we can add a little more chive or green onion to the top. So I gave that one more sprinkling, at which point my Pitmaster potato salad was ready to enjoy. And that, my friends, I thought was just about perfect. And again, I think the contrasts here are so important, right? Maybe some folks would enjoy this with a nice mayonnaise dressing, but for me, what makes this so enjoyable is the contrast between that earthy, very subtly smoky, rich potato and that sharp acidic dressing, as well as the aforementioned bracing, bitter, and briny other ingredients. So to summarize, I absolutely loved how this came out. And while very delicious eaten on its own, of course you're probably going to want to serve this next to something, which for me here was a piece of barbecued chicken. And no, this is not a tea shot. I don't have a brand new barbecue chicken recipe coming up. Although off the record, I am testing a new recipe that's kind of similar, and once perfected, I will be showing you that. But anyway, you're going to have no problem figuring out what to serve with this, since I think it would be great with anything you'd serve regular potato salad with, which for me is anything. But no matter what that thing is, I really do think you're going to love this technique, which is why I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.